So let's start with what I mean, what I don't mean by when we talk about the world, right? We're not talking about this physical earth. We're not talking about, the lions and the tigers and bears and so forth, or earthquakes and global warming, or a dying sun and comets and so forth. That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about dealing with the world. And again, we're not talking about people in the world, right? So for example, when John 3:16 says God so loved the world, he's talking about the people in this world. That's who he ultimately died for. And so that's not what we're referring to here. Instead, when the Bible is talking about the world and warning us about the world, it's ultimately warning us about the influence that this world system has, whether it be the political systems or the cultural or societal thinking. All of that is a negative influence on you and I as followers of Jesus. And they're negative because these systems are ultimately governed and designed by these demonic forces. They're influenced by the demonic. And they're meant to serve as a counterfeit to the kingdom of God. Remember, not all warfare is open. And so I think this is one of those very subversive, very covert ways where we don't even realize exactly what it is the enemy's up to. But nonetheless, that's what he's doing. Now, quick word here, because we need to be careful, I think, that we don't go down the road of the conspiracy side of things, right? The QAnon, for example, is very popular right now. And I think it's an unhealthy path for us, especially as believers, to go down that path and begin to blame everything on certain people, like the Koch brothers or George Soros or Bill Gates and others, right? Or some other powerful person out there. And I don't doubt that those people who are powerful, have money and so forth, they have agendas, and they are leveraging everything they can towards their own agenda, their own personal gain. And I don't doubt that. But I think we too often, we run the risk of giving them too much glory and praise when we begin to go down that path. See, let me read to you from Isaiah chapter 8, verse 1. Then the Lord said to me, "Take for yourself a large tablet and write on it in ordinary letters, 'Swift is the booty.'" Now, this verse really has nothing to do with it. We're going to look at a verse later on in this chapter. I just wanted to point out that the Bible talks about swift is the booty. And I got a chuckle out of that. And I know Greg and John Balfour have gotten a chuckle out of that because, some boys never grow up. So that's really all I want to do in that verse. But if you move on a couple verses now to verse 12, we're going to get to our point now. So in verse 12, it says, "You are not to say it is a conspiracy in regard to all that this people call a conspiracy. And you are not to fear what they fear or to be in dread of it." So what he's saying here is that just because things are happening, don't get panicked, don't get worried about it, and become fearful of all that's going on around us. And here's why it goes on to say, "It is the Lord of hosts whom you shall regard as holy, and he shall be your fear, and he shall be your dread." See, the danger is if we start saying everything is a conspiracy, we're giving too much glory and praise to those other people or those who might be, legitimately leveraging the agenda to their side, but we're too wrapped up in them. But the reality is God's the one that we fear. And we saw last week with Robin, it's a healthy fear. It's a respect. He's the one that's in control. And so then he says in verse 14, "Then he shall become a sanctuary, both to the house of Israel, a stone to strike and a rock to stumble over." And so basically here is that our salvation, our sanctuary, our provision, our protection is in Jesus. It's in God. And so we don't need to worry about necessarily all that's going on and be freaking out about it. We do have to be aware of it though, but not to the point where we start running around calling everything is a conspiracy. And I think Christians in particular are very susceptible to that line of thinking. And I say that because we know something's lurking in the background. We do know that there's demonic forces out there, that this world isn't right, and it's not improving and not getting better over time. But when we cry conspiracy about everything, we end up being discredited. We end up being ridiculed, and then when those things that do matter and do need to be pointed out, we don't have that credibility to stand on. So think about the boy who cried wolf. Right? He kept on playing that game, and then finally when there was a wolf and he cried out wolf, no one was there to listen to him. And I think the enemy, what he's doing is he's using this idea that everything is conspiracy to discredit believers. And so it's not that there is no such thing as conspiracies going on, but we don't need to be afraid of them.